when you leave people to hire whoever they want without any proper HR oversight or any questions being asked, what happens is people just pick people who are like them.
News. London Transport say they may have to close the underground system due to an infestation of horses.
As they start running away from the train.
And what the drivers say they fear most of all is a head-on collision with a blind tube man.
What's up, YouTube? Hello, it's me again. And in a week when Donald Trump allegedly is going to sue the BBC for $1 billion over their coverage of him, they did a panorama video in which they edited one of his speeches to make him look bad. Imagine how difficult that must have been. So I've done a little cut, done some editing, and I've edited some clips together to make him look good. Watch this.
Donald Trump is hot, young, bright, smart, highly educated, handsome, thin, and
I have a great relationship with the blacks.
It's good, isn't it? Took me a while, but at least I know he can't sue me because it's putting him in a good light. That's it for Mr. Trump. Let's dive in. I've got this. There are no Indigenous peoples in Europe from Akkad Daily, and I thought it would be interesting to have a look at this. So let's dive in.
let's go, ladies.
And see what he has to say.
You've probably seen this map going around lately. I've seen it a few times, and I thought it was worth talking about, because this is a map of the world's indigenous peoples, according to the UN.
Oh, the UN, the evil UN. Why do they hate the UN so much? I've no idea. So this is I'll show you this up close and personal. You can have a look for yourself if you pause. Let's see what he has to say about this.
And you'll notice that actually there are no indigenous people in Europe. Maybe a couple, maybe the Swiss. Do they count? But there are basically zero indigenous people in Europe. And you've got the same thing as well in Egypt. And Arabia. And this sort of area, Uganda. And whatever other areas. Well, that's not Uganda, that's like Ethiopia. Or whatever.
No, it's pointing to Uganda. If you have a look. I'm not an expert on Indigenous peoples or the history of civilization. I doubt Mr. Akkad is either. So I don't know how much I can comment on the science of this, but it'll be interesting to see what points he draws from it. He's already sarcastically said there are no Indigenous people in Europe. Let's see if that makes any difference to anything, really.
And the Central Asia, you think, well, what sense does that make? How is it that the Europeans aren't indigenous to Europe? How is it Egyptians aren't indigenous to Egypt?
Well, my understanding is that we all originated in Africa, which is where the first Homo sapiens evolved, and then we moved to the Fertile Crescent, which is modern-day Middle East, which at the time was covered in trees and vegetation and lush, what became farmland. So we're all from Africa, as I understand it. Depends how far back you go, doesn't it? Like the Stuart Lee routine. I mean, we're all from fish originally.
And before them, 400 million years ago, when the first fish crawled up onto the land, land. You get back in the sea. You finned cunt.
Or plankton.
I mean, if there's one group of people on Earth who we can be pretty damn sure are going to have a huge amount of genetic continuity, it's going to be the Egyptians, right? And probably the Arabians. And definitely the British.
Ah, the British. We're amazing, aren't we, the British? Let's have a look at this.
Again, this is just factually shown that there are descendants of the Britons of 10,000 years ago still living.
So, 10,000 years is not a very long time. I think civilization came about approximately 13,000 years ago. So that's a bit younger than the start of civilization, which is basically when farming began in the Fertile Crescent area. So what? Farming began 13,000 years ago. We've existed for 10,000 years, but Homo sapiens have been around for about 50 million years, or maybe even 100 million years, as far as I understand it. That time scale, really, 10,000 years is literally nothing. It's not literally nothing, but it's virtually nothing.
Within like a mile and a half of where their ancestors lived. And this, completely true, by the way, this is just a graphic just to show. I guess I find it kind of shocking. And so,
do you?
For some reason, though, this chap is not indigenous, even though his ancestors have been here for 10,000 years. There was another one found recently as well. 3,000 years. This German family have lived in Lower Saxony for 3,000 years, according to Bild. And the DNA analysis shows that ancestors of Manfred Huchthausen live just 2 kilometres away. So about a mile and a half.
So his family have lived there, originally in a cave, for 3,000 years, and they haven't even moved more than a mile and a half from where they originated. I mean, I thought my family were boring. We only went to, Calais and Boulogne on holiday when we were camping in Folkestone. We didn't move anywhere either. We just lived in Essex for the whole of my childhood and into adulthood. I thought that was boring, but imagine for 3,000 years, imagine not moving more than a mile and a half from where your family originated. That's really boring.
I mean, that is just remarkable coincidence. Yeah, so this guy was found in a cave, and his ancestor was found about a mile and a half away.
So what difference does it make? We've only been travelling in large numbers across to other countries for a couple of 100 years, and only in the last few decades have normal average people been able to get on a plane or a boat and travel a long way across the world. So what?
This is just when this guy was found dead in a cave after 3,000 years. But we don't know how much longer before that guy's family had been there. So this isn't like, it's only 3,000 years, or it's locked at 3,000 years. We just don't know. So why is it that according to the UN, there are just no European indigenous peoples? Because it would seem like all of the peoples of Europe are actually to some extent indigenous. And the answer to that is how they define these things, which you're going to be shocked to hear. But even the way they define these things, actually, we are indigenous by these own standards, right? So they don't have a proper official definition. What they have is just a kind of like, well, these people are indigenous, right? These are like, natives.
Why do you need a definition? Surely indigenous just means some people who were there for a long time before some other people. It's all relative to what timescale you're looking at.
Pre-colonial or something like that. Self-identification as indigenous peoples at the individual level and accepted by the community as their member. Right. So if, say, the...
Self-identification. So that could be anyone. I guess that's the point he's making.
English self-identify as being indigenous at the individual level, and our community, the English community, accepts us as members of the English community, then
we're indigenous. Fine. Well, I'm from Essex, but I identify as being from London because I can't stand Essex, and I'm not proud to be aligned with that area. So does that mean I'm not indigenous to Essex? Maybe.
This is something that, basically everyone does think, even though most of the time they've got no reason to articulate it. This would make us indigenous. Historical continuity with pre-colonial or pre-settler societies. Yeah, we've definitely got that. We were here long before colonialism happened, and long before the sort of modern settler plantations of mass migration.
Long periods of time in a place makes you indigenous. But again, it's the same point. How long? 10,000 years? 3,000 years? 100 years? 50 years?
Strong link to territories and surrounding natural resources. Well, my goodness. Could the English have a stronger link to England? It's hard to imagine how we've got a strong link to any territory, really. Do we have distinct social, economic, or political systems? Yes, we do. Do I have my copy of the English, the Origins of English Individualism handy? No, I think it's on my bookshelf.
He's read a book. He's quite intelligent, this guy.
I read a book once. Green it was.
But yes, we absolutely have distinct social systems, in particular, distinct economic systems, well, that ended up becoming capitalism, and distinct political systems, which was parliamentary democracy. So we have a distinct language, culture, and beliefs as well, of course. The English language is distinct. The culture of England and our beliefs are distinct. And non-dominant groups of society. That's the key. That's the bit. Now, I would argue that actually we are not getting representation. I would argue that the laws are actually stacked so that the English are not a dominant group of society. As Enoch Powell would have put it, the black man has the whip hand of the white man.
Yes. Good point. Good point, mate. This is one of those ridiculous right-wing fallacies, essentially, that black people, Muslims, immigrants have more rights than we do. No, they just have rights, same as we have rights. We have rights, they have rights. You see, implicit in this idea that they've got more rights than us is the idea that they shouldn't have as many rights as us. That's what it comes down to. It's this feeling that if you're not, white, really, but let's say if you've not been in this country long enough, that's what it comes down to. That's what we're talking about here. If you've only been here for one generation or maybe two generations, or you've just come over in your lifetime, then you shouldn't deserve to have the same rights as the people who've been here for 500, 1,000 years. But to say that black people have the whip hand or that they are more important than white people is ridiculous. Black people in Britain are discriminated against. It may not be as bad as slavery. It may not be being lynched by the Ku Klux Klan, but they don't have as many rights. They have the same legal rights, but they are discriminated against. As I said in my last video, I worked in the NHS and I witnessed ridiculous amounts of discrimination. In fact, let's stop this here because it's frankly ridiculous. Because I really want to talk about my experiences. So I worked in a hospital for 15 years, about 5 years as a ward manager and the rest of the time as a staff nurse. And it's very interesting in the NHS, the way it's structured. If you're a ward manager, which is, I guess, in most companies would be considered lower middle management, like the first tier of middle management, you have the power to hire and fire. You organise interviews. HR does very little. There's very little HR in the NHS for the amount of employees there are. So they're extremely overstretched. So you organise the interviews. You often on your own shortlist. You do the interview with maybe a senior, maybe a matron, and essentially the ward manager gets to pick who they have on their wards. Sounds great in many ways, doesn't it? The autonomy at that relatively low level of management to hire and fire whoever you want. But this is the result of that, at least in the hospital I was in. There was an Irish ward and there was a Filipino ward and there were a few African wards. There was even the ward I took over as manager was a Caribbean ward. And what I mean by that is that clearly the managers of those wards had either consciously, which I would argue they probably did, or unconsciously, due to unconscious bias, hired people from the same ethnic group as themselves. On the Irish ward, which was a horrible bullying ward, terrible culture, the ward manager was from Ireland, Catholic, Irish Catholic. The two ward sisters below her were from Ireland, Irish Catholic. The senior staff nurse below them was, guess what, Irish Catholic. Then there were two other Irish nurses who worked on the ward. This is about 24 staff probably in total. So you're getting the pattern here, aren't you? That's about over a quarter already. And then about 6 other staff at least were from the Philippines. And as I discovered, because of the Spanish influence on the Philippines, they are also Catholics, almost exclusively Catholic. So you've actually got well over half the ward is Catholic. There were no black nurses on that ward when I worked there. And if you consider that on the ward I eventually took over and managed, I think there were no white nurses. So it gives you an idea. The vast majority of staff on that ward were from the Caribbean and the rest were African. Obviously you have a few outliers, maybe Indian member of staff, maybe someone from Brazil, anywhere, it's London. It's very multicultural. But yeah, shocking really, isn't it? That when you leave people to hire whoever they want without any proper HR oversight or any questions being asked, what happens is people just pick people who are like them. I mean, I'm quite proud I didn't do that. I took over the ward, and by the time I retired in 2022, I think it was, my ward was gone by then because of COVID, but by the time I left that ward, there were probably 20% African, 15% Afro-Caribbean. There was someone from South America. There was Chinese member of staff. There was someone from the Philippines. There was Black British, couple of people. So it was extremely varied by the time I left the ward. There's very few white English nurses or British nurses, because we don't want to do that job. It's too difficult. We'd rather have people from all over the world come and do it for us. Anyway, so on this video, those are my main points, really. There's a lot of things I could talk about. Length of time in an area, so what? We've always moved around the world as human beings, and nation states have only existed for a few hundred years. Clearly, way back in our history, when we were hunter-gatherers, there were no nation states. People went wherever they wanted, and clearly there were a lot fewer people, so it didn't cause the issues we have now. And the idea that black people and Muslims basically have more rights than British people, I'm sorry, it's absolute shite. And next time you hear someone say that, because people say it endlessly, it's a favourite thing for people who aren't thinking to say, isn't it? Oh, these Muslims have more rights than we do. They get everything and we get nothing. It's not true. The fact is they get the same. And if you're a little bit racist, you probably don't like that. So have a little think about that in your brain box, yeah? And I'll see you next time. Don't nobody go nowhere.